Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Start It Up Wednesday. We've got a really good one for you guys today. So shout out to everyone that's joined us from all around the world. We've got some people from Ghana, from Iran. Awesome to see you guys joining in. We've got the CEO and founder of CodeC with us, Shania Levin, and she's calling in from San Francisco. Shania, how are you?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to chat.
Absolutely. So this one is going to be a little bit different than some of our other Started Up Wednesdays. We usually have Rizelle, who's our other co-host, and she does things a little bit different than me. So hopefully everyone likes this vibe as well. We're going to be talking a little bit more about your founder story, who you are, and how you got everything kind of started. But I love for you to just kind of give us a highlight of who Shania is and tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm Shania. I am all things developers. I've been working in developer tools for 12 years. I know I'm much older than I look. I studied business and computer science. And I've worked at Google and Cloudflare and Docker and a bunch of other developer focused startups before starting my own. It's been an absolute joy to be able to, support this amazing, group of people. I like to think that developers are like force multipliers. And so I've spent my entire career there helping developers, making their lives easier. And that's kind of what led me to, and my co-founder starting CodeSee.
Very cool. So a little bit of background for those joining. She's been the founder of CodeC for about 3 years now.
Yeah, depending on when you start counting.
Yeah, and tell us what you've raised so far and kind of where you are, the stage of your company.
Yeah, we raised $10 million. The thing that we're trying to build is we started our platform in open source, visualizing open source repos, and then we kind of moved into larger and larger enterprise code bases. And so that's kind of been the impetus for all of this. How do we understand all of this code we have all around us? And with the advent of AI, like it's going to be even more. And so we're really excited to help devs like understand all the code that's going on in their careers and code bases and open source projects, etc.
This is going to be a really exciting episode. I'm super excited. Before I keep going, I just want to make sure that everyone knows, like, if you got comments or questions, please throw them in the chat and we'll have either myself or Shania answer them. But a little bit about me, because this is definitely not about me, but just a shout out really to you. I'm a former founder as well. Before I started working at GitHub, I raised a little bit of raising $10 million is a ridiculous, incredible feat of accomplishments. So like super shout out, standing ovation, bow, like everything, especially as a female founder and a founder of color. Like amazing congratulations to you and your team for what you've been able to build so far.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I actually want to start there. You are a female founder and a founder of color.
Yeah.
I really would love to know, like, how has that experience been for you? Both like when starting the company, as far as like legitimizing what you're doing and getting that credibility, but as well as like as you start that VC journey and you're starting to pitch and meet those connections, like how has that played into what you've been able to accomplish or not accomplish so far?
Yeah. So I think as a, fundraising is always a challenge for anybody, no matter what you look like. And I think that it was, difficult for me. But we had some advantages that other people might not, know about. And I tend to talk about these things because once you kind of know the rules of the game, everything becomes a lot easier. So I had no idea any of these things before I started. And it's the VC community is actually quite counterintuitive to how we think as developers and how we think as, founders. the VC industry has their own rules and what they care about. They actually have investors in and of themselves called LPs.
Mm.
And these LPs are, organizations, they're endowments, they're all of these things who want to take their money and get a return on them. And so how how VC community works is, most VCs think that, most startups are going to fail, right? And that's okay. We all learn, we all grow. That's why they're, serial entrepreneurs. But the there's going to likely there's going to be one startup that's going to return the amount of their funds.
Mm-hmm.
And so you as a founder have to not play into the story of why you founded the company only. You have to, in addition, think about how do you pitch and frame this so that when a VC pitches and frames you to their investors,
Mm-hmm.
they can articulate this is why this is going to be that one company that's going to, provide the returns that you're looking for. And so coming to, pitching, coming to, your deck, all of your assets, with that frame in mind, as opposed to, here's just the stats about the business. What's the big vision? What's the big goal? How are you going to change the industry? How do you have the right team in place to make sure you can execute well? Having a different frame of mind around that really helps with how you pitch, how you think, how you kind of get that credibility that you asked for earlier.
Yeah, so this is an important conversation because, like I said, normally when Rizal does Started Up Wednesday, we really focus on the tech of the company, and we absolutely will get there. We want to see what CodeC is doing and get a demo of it. But it's not very often that we have a company that's raised so much money. And so I think you bring a lot of valuable context to the VC space and how a lot of these viewers that are entrepreneurs or maybe thinking about being entrepreneurs can kind of tailor what they're doing and thinking and tinker their mindset a bit to get into a place where they'll be successful fundraising. So I think this is why this is a really great episode for us. Awesome. So we started with a little bit about your founder story. I'd love to now jump into CodeSee and kind of see what everybody or have everyone see what you've been working on. So I'd love for you to show us maybe a quick demo of what you guys do and tell us a little bit about more about CodeSee.
Awesome. So before I kind of get started on this, everyone knows that understanding code is hard, right? And today there's more and more code than ever before, particularly as you're starting your startups, if you're having contractors, if you're having scaling up your teams, as you're working at companies and you're like leaving and trying to think about starting your companies. Your code base is the single asset that moves, if you're making a platform or you're making an online product, it is the core of your business. And so understanding it, having control over it, being productive in it, shipping new code, it has to be the utmost importance. And that is what CodeSee does. CodeSee is a code understanding platform that helps you to onboard new team members, refactor new code bases, and ship new code faster. And the way that we do that is in 4 modules: our service map, our repo map, our individual code review map, as well as automations. So what I'm showing you here is our service map. Essentially what you do is you plug this in and we can automatically visualize your high-level architecture across all of your repo services, message queues, into your cloud, all of those good things, which gives you a lot of flexibility. Like, oh, if you want to see your endpoints, you can absolutely see your endpoints. You wanted to dive in and see, like, how is Postgres making all those queries? You can just dive in. Something that we uniquely do is articulate something called flows, which is how does execution data flow through your system. And so really detailing, here's how data flows through and all of its variations. So if you've got, debugging turned on, or if you've got an additional edge case or path, you really get a holistic view of how all of your platform is working. And then you can dive in to seeing a visualization within the repository. So how all of your code is connected. And these are all visualizations that you plug into your GitHub repo. Shout out to GitHub. To be able to create those visuals, but also they will auto update as your underlying code changes. You can make asynchronous walkthroughs. You can have that living documentation. So you don't actually have to do it manually on your own. And these are super flexible with figuring out refactoring or figuring out new feature maps or figuring out, technical debt maps, really providing that fast mental model for how something works. And then very quickly, the third module is being able to visualize a code review. So because we work with GitHub a ton, we're partners, we can actually post a visualization on the body of every PR to give you that quick mental model of how my change actually affects the rest of the architecture. So you can really visually say like, oh, here's all the dependencies that I think should happen. Did I ship a bug? Probably. I can really get a chance to fix it very, very quickly. And these can kind of stick around as permanent artifacts. So as new team members come on, as they leave, as you change, these all can stick around. And then finally, we put a whole rules engine around our platform. So once you have information, you can articulate, oh, in this area of the code base, only do this. So one of my favorite automations is a very simple one, which is don't ship console logs into production, which, as you can see, happens all the time, just as recently as an hour ago. So our conditional automations can really search your code for an individual function, as granular as an individual function, and articulate a checklist. And they can be really code base specific. These only actually show up if you touch that area of the code. So devs are not going to end up with these 50-point checklists that everybody ignores. And so all of this stuff is really, really helpful for making sure that you set up maintainable, scalable, easy to work with code, no matter who you bring on or what your business does. You can easily change and pivot if you kind of set this up from day one.
Yeah, this sounds and looks like something that every company should have.
We like to think so.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that's why you got the backing. So tell us, like, how did you get started with CodeC however many years ago? What was the moment that you said, hey, like, this is something that needs to be done? And how did you start making that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So this actually came out of my time at Docker. I've been in developer tools for a number of years, but I think this was the situation that happened at Docker was just the most painful. I was a senior director of product there, and we were trying to ship a feature that developers have been asking us for literally years for. We spent 6 months building this feature, me and 10 engineers, and we were about to launch it. 2 days before the launch, there was a show-stopping bug. The number of vulnerabilities on the front end didn't match the number on the back end. We're like, what are we supposed to do about this bug? And so from there, we kind of tracked down where the bug was coming from, and it was coming from an area of the code base that nobody understood. There was no documentation, there's no insight, there was no nothing. And the people that knew that area of the code base the most were no longer at Docker. And we were stuck. It would have taken a month to read all of that code line by line and understand what's happening. And we didn't have time to ship that feature in 2 days. So it didn't get out. It was just done. And I think that was the most painful thing of when you're trying to do something really important and you cannot move forward, you just get completely stuck. There was a lot of obscenities yelled. There were, everyone was very upset. This was a waste of 6 months. And when you're, trying to move a company forward, that 6 months time wasted is really, really important, and no one wants to be in that position. And so I think I, thought, this has happened, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times during my career. Like, why don't we understand our code? And when I asked that question, I'm an insatiably curious person. And so I started looking for a solution. And the reason why is because I think that the way that we read and understand code hasn't changed in 50 years. The only way we do it is to read all of the code line by line, and visually, mentally come up with a mental model in our heads about how the code works. That is the slowest, manual, most unscalable way to understand how our code works. And visualizations are the fastest. You can grok a mental model very quickly, because you're already doing it in your head. And wouldn't it just be nice if the code did it? And that's kind of what you're
Awesome.
doing.
So I saw while you were doing your demo, you have a number of like third parties that are listed there. Are those integrations that you have with other companies? Like what kinds of integrations does CodeC have?
Yeah, we do. We can actually visualize, a bunch of different services and spans. We work with GitHub. We work with Segment. I think we have like some HubSpot things, to make sure that we, make sure we follow up with all the people who are really excited to try our products. And so, really, really, we're constantly adding new things all the time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And is it cloud agnostic? Like any cloud provider that you're working with will be able to be visualized?
Yes and no. So if you plug in service maps, yes, but we do have some restrictions, but we are actually expanding.
Okay.
So right now, if you've got a GitHub repo and you've got an APM like Datadog or OpenTelemetry, or if you have nothing, that's also perfectly reasonable. We do a combination of static and dynamic analysis to be able to create the visualizations that we have. And so if you've got one of those, then good to go. And if not, we are expanding very rapidly as we speak.
Awesome. So we've just gone a little bit into the conversation. Again, like as you guys are listening, if you have questions for Shania, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll make sure we get them asked, whether it's about the product or the company or her journey, as well as we continue to talk about like how she's started and continued this path with CodeC and others. So throw them in the chat. Love to see if we get any. Thank you guys. So Shania, you mentioned being insatiably curious.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and you did a really good job of creating the segue for me, is what are some of the traits that you think are most important when you're going to be a founder, make that decision and start your company?
I think a few. There are two. One is to be curious about how all the things work, because there is going to come a time that you're going to need to make a decision that you know nothing about. That just kind of is the nature of getting a startup off the ground. And so being able to really think about, how do I learn something? How do I learn enough to be dangerous and kind of move forward with very little information, is a very helpful trait. And I think the second is kind of the flip side of that, not just, being curious about how things work, but also what happens when that you need to internally in your mind, in your heart and soul, that you need to change. I think as a founder, every insecurity that I've ever had, I've had to push through. Every single thing that I wasn't good at, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to have to do that. I've absolutely had to do. And I think the universe was like, ha ha ha, you I'm gonna make you do that thing that you're terrible at. And it's really, it's sometimes really painful. And so how do you self-reflect? How do you evolve? How do you take time for yourself to, get that mental space to grow and work through whatever, issues you have as a human, because we're all humans starting these companies, right? And so I think that that's been really, really important to me. You're There are going to be mistakes. I've definitely made a ton. And so how do you, work through that, evolve? How are you self-reflective? Are you empathetic to other people in their situations? While also doing what's right for the company. It's
Yeah.
it's a big challenge, but you grow and you learn and you form an opinion, and you gain confidence with that opinion.
Absolutely. We've got a comment from Juan too, who's, as a new founder, all of this is fascinating. That's amazing to hear. Like, that's exactly why we do Started Up Wednesday. That's exactly why we want to mix it up with as much as we bring on technical founders to go through all the code, and so you can see the back end of everything. Conversations like this are super important as well, because as new founders, as potential founders, I think all of us have the potential to be a business owner or founder at some point in our lives, whether it's going to be a small enterprise or a large enterprise that we undergo. So yes, we're happy to see that it's super helpful. We've got a question here.
Yeah.
What is the best situation you can do when you have a bug and you can't solve it for days?
Get CodeSee kind of set up. I think that honestly, there's this there's this thing with engineering and being a technical founder, and being a founder, right? In general, where you're trying to move the company forward, but there's something blocking you and you don't necessarily have full control over it. Or maybe you do, and you're the one debugging. I think that, um, there is that pull, that cognitive dissonance of, oh gosh, every day, every minute matters, and this thing isn't solved yet. And I think that that's just going to happen. And there's a little bit of patience that you need, but also you have to know, like, okay, when to stop being patient. And I think that in the interim, to give you solace, there are some problems where you can come up with creative solutions, right? Maybe there's some advisors that you can kind of pull in, or maybe there's some, consultants that you can pull in to kind of help. If you and the dev, can't figure it out. There's always a lot of creative solutions, or you just work through it.
Yeah,
Those are kind of the options.
absolutely. Sometimes you come up to a problem and it's a problem that you just have to work through, or it's unsolvable in that capacity, right? Like you said,
Totally.
you have to come up with a creative way to work around it, and maybe it's not the solution that you thought you were going to have, but it's the solution that's necessary for that problem.
Totally.
Awesome. So I am super excited to learn more about, well, a lot of things, but one thing that is a really important conversation that I think needs to be had is kind of the dynamic between founders and how that kind of starts. So are you a technical co-founder, or would you call yourself a regular co-founder?
I am a technical co-founder, and my co-founder is a more technical co-founder.
Oh, wow. So that's the best of both worlds, right? So
Yeah.
normally there's a technical co-founder, the one that does most, if not all, of the code at the beginning. And then there's a more business, not that the technical co-founders aren't business savvy, but the more business strategy centered co-founder. So you guys have two technical co-founders, which is awesome. How did you guys meet and then start to kind of create that delineation of responsibilities? Like, who's going to take care of what at the very beginning to get to this point?
Totally. Since I am a technical co-founder, but like my co-founder is one of the most brilliant engineers I've ever met. And so he took over engineering and I took over GTM or go to market. And that has been a steep learning curve, particularly in this economy. But, that's kind of, the nature of things. Someone has to do the go to market stuff. And if I could leave any advice, it would be don't build anything. Don't write a single line of code until you get the kind of go to market functions at least hypothesized and tested. It's been really, really important. I think our meeting was a little bit unique. I'm not sure if that's if anyone can replicate this.
Okay.
We happen to be married. And so basically, I had the idea for CodeSee, and I was supposed to start it with some co-founders from Docker. And I had the idea late 2019, but we were supposed to actually start the company, early 2020. And we all know, I don't need to rehash early 2020. I don't need to rehash that. Basically, I just we decided the two people that I was, deciding to start the company with decided that that time wasn't the best time to start a company. And so I ended up, kind of moving forward with the idea on my own. And I happened to have a brilliant engineer in my house that I would ask questions to. What I was imagining doing was not technically possible before. No one had ever done it before. There was not just copying Twitter at this point, right? So I needed to brainstorm to try to figure out how do you scale visualizing code. And so we just were having so much fun that we decided to start the company together. And I think that how we delineate responsibilities is relevant for any co-founding relationship. We essentially have set up very early on a few key decisions. Which person was going to have the final word or the final decision-making power in each of the areas. And if you have that up front, and if you agree upon that up front, the other one can provide, advice to the other. But if you're in their area, you kind of leave the ultimate decision up to them.
Sure.
And I think that just that one decision on who makes the final call gets you a long way.
Yeah.
The other thing is good communication. There's this book that we both love called Crucial Conversations. And when you can have and work through important, really critical, really hard conversations, that will get you the rest of the way, because then, egos would be, less involved, arguments would be less involved. You can actually resolve them, in a very clear way. And you have a framework and a structure to tackle those things. And I think the two co-founders of Eventbrite were also married. And they also recommended this same book of how you kind of solve those challenges, because they are going to come up. It's inevitable. They will. Founding a company is really hard. And so those two decisions are really, really helpful.
That is awesome, and a sick story. So you guys, COVID happened and you decided, you know what, let me just go at it myself. And it turns out the person sitting right next to you for however many years was the person that you're going to go at it with. That's awesome.
It wasn't planned. Our marriage was intentional and the company was not.
Good. At least in that order, that's how that worked out.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that people can be serial entrepreneurs, and I've lauded the accomplishments that you've already had so far. Is this your first try at a company? And if so, like, what are some of those key takeaways from the very beginning stages of, like, you get up against a problem and you decide, yeah, I want to keep going through, or maybe like some of the other co-founders or the potential co-founders,
Yeah.
when you go, this is not the best time. Like, talk about how that thought process for your first company, you've made those decisions.
So I think some of the key takeaways, again, are like getting the go-to-market stuff like laid out, at least a hypothesis, and figuring out a way to test it. And this is, who your ICP is. What value are you providing to them? How are you going to reach them? Like, actually try to reach them. And then what does that process look like to get their feedback, talking to them about their top problems. And I think figuring out those, you can attack it two ways. One is first kind of starting with that and getting validation that you can reach that group of people. Or you can decide to build something and try to wedge it and figure out where it fits. I would definitely take the former. And I think that, how you, one key thing that I didn't know that was going to be super important in today's kind of digital landscape is writing. How do you write engaging content? How do you build an audience? How do you, bring all of those details and marketing copy and clearly articulating your ideas to other people really comes in handy as you start to, if you're in B2B enterprise sales, consumer drives. Like, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of consumers. So if you're doing a consumer business, hats off to you. I'm terrified of it. I have no advice there, but it does help a lot. I think that, I think the other kind of key takeaway is the importance of having what I call flexible conviction, which is like you have a strong opinion but loosely held, right? Because, you need to have confidence, but you're going to be confident in the face of like no information. And so how do you have that cognitive dissonance? It's a daily struggle, but like having that, and I think that kind of goes back to being really clear on like who you're targeting, how you're going to reach them, what value you're going to provide, and how do you articulate your ideas clearly. That just kind of seeps into a lot of different things.
So you said a couple of things that I want to like double and underline and like circle. One of the things actually was, I think you mentioned it as maybe a quote or a saying that someone gave, but same thing for me when I worked at one point, and we would hear all the time, Jeff Bezos would say something to the effect of, be stubborn about the goal, but flexible about how you get there. So like,
Totally.
You want to be ruthlessly prioritizing towards like what it is that you're shooting for, regardless of, they would show like newspapers, tech newspapers from like 1999. And the cover would be something, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like, what is AWS and why would they start it? And, the story that we got was like, he knew that the building blocks that we were using for Amazon.com was going to be something that could power the world. And everybody thought it was crazy. But, there are ways that you can continue to fight through all of those kind of distractions to get to where you want to be, but you have to be willing to be nimble and adapt to it. So yes, to that, definitely.
I did not know that Bezos said that. I feel like I made that up, but apparently, I mean, I guess that makes sense.
I'm paraphrasing, but something to that effect, yeah. And then
that means I'm probably doing something right.
Absolutely, you're doing something right, I would say. And then you also said like, find your audience. Like when you're building, find your audience, like understand who they are, elicit feedback from them. I think the phrase that I heard the most as a founder was product market fit. It's like always product market fit. and it gets kind of redundant at times, but it's really important to, what that really means is understanding where your place is in the market and who those customers are and what their problem is and how you're going to solve it. And when you start to understand that, then you can put lines of code together and build your product and start to put a prototype together after maybe you've kind of mechanical turked something to kind of test and understand, right? But definitely understanding who your audience is that you're trying to reach and eliciting their feedback is important.
Totally. I think what I really learned was that product market fit is this weird, elusive, no one can pin it down. No one has a clear definition.
Yeah.
Everybody's is different of what that means. But the way that I have seen it is, most people get the product right. They don't get the market part right. And market basically means a group of people.
Yep.
Right? Can you get your product to said group of people? And what most people, that kind of underlying, that they don't mention in product market fit is the fit part, which is they pay you money for said products, right? And so how do you do the marketing and the sales portion, particularly right now in this, in this environment, is really critical. And as a technical founder, like, marketing's hard. If you're not used to doing it, it's like, it's just like engineering. You've got all these other kinds of engineers. You've got all these different types of marketers. And it can kind of feel very, very like skeevy a bit. But you do provide value to a group of people and you can solve their problems. Learning the mechanics, learning the foundations of the market fit part is a thing.
Absolutely is. And you bring up an interesting point, and I want to ask more about, like, how are you, or how have you found marketing your business to other people? Because it's not a very sexy thing. Like, if you're a developer, you're like, man, this is awesome. But outside of that, you're kind of like hoping people kind of get it and understand, like, hey, if you have these things in your mind, if you could visualize it, how cool would that be? But how interesting or hard is it for you to convey that message to people that might not automatically get it?
So I think that not everybody is going to get it.
Yeah.
Not everybody is going to, not everyone is going to get the thing that you're trying to build. Not everyone is going to think that it's the most important problem, for whatever reason. And I think that's why getting very clear on who you're targeting is really important, because then you do that in the hopes of that group of people is going to think that this is really, really important. And so, and even within that group, not every one of those people are going to think it's really important. I think it's getting really clear on your ideas and articulating the benefits and the value of, like, what does their day look like post your product? What is the value? There's always this double-edged sword of like providing metrics and providing, numerical like data to show that your product is good, but you need people to try it out in order to get the data. So there's this chicken and egg problem. And you need to have enough built in order for them to try it out. There's a whole thing. And I think that that's kind of what has really resonated with me. My coach told me, it's like that catch-22 is the exact place that every company has to work through. There's a book called The Messy Middle. If regardless, you just have to find your way through it. There's no easy way to find your way through it. There's no straightforward way of finding your way for it. You're going to have hypotheses and they're going to fail. You just have to do a bunch of things and figure out your way of what's matching up in your head and get through the messy middle, because every company goes through it. It's just one of those things,
Yeah, and what's important to note, like for a couple of people that said that they were new founders on here, or maybe even people that haven't said anything about being a new founder, but they're thinking about it. Like, you're not going through these things alone. Like, when you're a founder, you build yourself kind of like an army of people, whether they be advisors, or like you said, co-founders, or mentors of yours from previous walks of life. Like, when you're going through this messy middle, as you called it, like, there are plenty of people that both have the experience and have the experience with that specifically, or just have the experience in life to be able to help you through that. So it's daunting. It's definitely difficult, but as a founder, you're going to build yourself a team of people that are going to be able to help you through that and kind of detangle some of the mess a bit to help you.
Definitely.
So we've got a few minutes, and like, this has been so awesome for me, and I think our audience as well, because I liken a conversation like this to, like, when it's quiet at the dinner table, like everyone's eating. Like,
Yeah.
there are no questions, because we're doing a really good job, I think, and you're doing a really good job of explaining what that
Thank
process
you.
is like. I know I'm learning a whole lot myself. So I want to flip it back to you and to kind of talk about CodeC and what's kind of next for you guys. Where can we start to see you and get to download your product and whatever else? Like, how can we get to see more of you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just go to CodeSee.io. Active on Twitter for the moment.
No
And
threads? No threads yet?
life as a founder is really busy. Maybe in the next few weeks, maybe.
Okay.
I think that if anyone is interested in trying CodeC, getting it kind of set up from day zero, we work with the Microsoft for Startups program as well. We've seen a lot of really great feedback of, like, how do you get code visibility set up from day zero of your startup, preventing a lot of the future problems that literally all companies with code go through, which is all of them, which is, how do I understand my code? Kind of getting that set up from day one and just kind of have it running in the background can be incredibly helpful with you wrapping your head around, how do I decide headcount, after you raise money? How do I decide, like, who needs to cover what area of the code base? How do I know which people to hire? Because this is what I'm trying to figure out. And so I think that like, sign up for CodeC at CodeC.io. If you have any questions, there's a chat bubble at the bottom of the app. It goes directly to my cell phone, because I want to talk to literally every single person.
Awesome. We've got a couple of questions before we go, so this is really great. Two I want to highlight. One is, could you suggest some good resources for expanding your founder team if you don't happen to have married them?
Yeah, I think, being active in communities, being friends with, meeting people who are different from you, who can, help with different sides of the business. I think that, there's a lot of, I think there was the lady who started Modern Health. She did co-founder dating, and she had this like 136 questionnaire of when she was trying to start a co-founder. There are a lot of resources for finding a co-founder, but again, like, how do you access a new person, right? How do you make friends and meet them? This is, it's hard to get into a co-founder relationship. And so building that, I think that there are some actual programs like On Deck that you can join to find your founder community. Founder communities are really easy and fast to join. So definitely join a bunch and meet some new potential founders.
I would also say, like, as you build your network of people, whether they be advisors and mentors, as you start to build, they will have, because they're plugged into those communities, as you said, they'll have ideas of people or former founders or current people that are looking to be co-founders at their disposal as well. So as you build that community, people will start to find you by that second and third degree of separation sort of thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is that would you say that it's worth investing in marketing at the beginning of your startup if you're a sole technical first founder? A large yes.
Yes. Did I say yes? Yes. I think it, as also a technical first founder, it is, it will make everything so much easier. It will make coding easier. It will make product development easier. It will make growth easier. Startups really don't fail because the product is bad typically. They fail because they didn't get proper traction. And so the earlier you can really work through all of those details on the marketing side and getting access to that group of people, you can build a really clear, specific product that solves a problem. And it's not going to be easy, but it's 100% necessary.
Awesome.
So doing it as early as possible from day zero. Please just do that very early as possible. Is my best advice.
Cool. I'll kind of source any last questions for the last couple minutes, but as we kind of wrap up the questions, any last minute words of advice, words of wisdom, Shania?
I think that, this sounds a little cliche, but really pick something if you're going to start a company in that you can be passionate about for the next 10 years, right? And I think people are like, oh, follow your passions. And that kind of drives me crazy. But like, I think a better way to articulate that is, what are the things that you can be excited about for the literal next 10 years? Because that's how long it's going to take. And so there's going to be a lot of ups. There's going to be a lot of downs. There's going to be a lot of challenges. And so are you so passionately driven to solve that particular problem that all of the other challenges will just kind of fall by the wayside? That's where you should start your startup.
Awesome. And then we'll take one last question, and is, would you recommend having a full-time job while starting your startup in bootstrapping?
That's an excellent question. So I will tell you my story. So I had the idea for the startup at the end of 2018. My previous people who wanted to start a company didn't join. I was working on the idea nights and weekends. I actually took a different job as well. So I was working on CodeC nights and weekends in addition to a day job. And I personally think that it's great. Trying to bootstrap a company, until you've validated a bunch of things and you have no income, just adds this maybe you operate well in that kind of stress. But you don't want to end up, in a bad situation later. And so I think that for me, it was the right decision. Then I happened to raise money while I was for CodeC while I had a full-time job. And I stayed at my job 2 months later, like post raising money. That I do not recommend. Everything moved so quickly. Everything moved so fast that I didn't realize that after you raise money, people are probably going to talk to you like during business hours when you have a full-time job. And so that I don't recommend that. But I do think that working your job while you're trying to validate, getting all the marketing things, getting your first kind of product, kind of getting everything together. Having a full-time job also gives you some flexibility if you want to put some money aside to, hire a contractor, if you want to run some experiments, if you want to, do that sort of thing. as opposed to always not moving your company forward because of, not raising funding or anything like that. And so there's always some trade-offs and but you do what works for you, essentially.
Yes, I would plus one that as well. Do what works for you. But I also, when I started my company, like I did it with a full-time job, and you chose weekends, I chose nights. So after I would close my laptop at 5, and at the time I had kids, so I would do daddy time from like 5 to 7:30, and then like from 8 o'clock to 2 a.m. was like startup time. And I would have Shark Tank on in the background so I could like pick up on things by osmosis that I didn't know about for VC terms and whatever else. And
Totally.
you're just working and doing your thing. So yeah, definitely you do what works for you. But if you can work while you're building so that you've got that flexibility for things that might come up, and you can bootstrap for as long as possible before getting that raise, that's the way to do it.
Definitely.
Shania, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. CodeC.io. Remember, if you guys want to check it out. And yes, we will see you guys next time on Start It Up Wednesday. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.